Afternoon, history scholars. Today is May 19th, it's Tuesday, starting out our distance learning week talking about American business. So as we left off last week, we were talking about the railroads and what impact that they had on, you could argue, basically the development of the entire world, right? Because now we have these massive lumbering things that can haul so many goods and passengers in such a short time, when it used to take, what was it? I think we said with the Transcontinental Railroad, it was like it's 21 times faster or something. It's ridiculous. So, but not only that, we start to see the markets of where companies are able to actually send their goods and sell them get way bigger, right? Because beforehand, it really had much less to do with the cost of things and the size of companies as to how much they could sell. It had to do with the shipping costs, and the railroad brought that way down. So when you're talking about a market, and like maybe if you had a warm up that asked you about that, that's what it's talking about, right? Is that the railroad expanded the market, or the ability to sell goods for companies, super far. Now, as we're going to see, for bigger companies that can produce things cheaper, that's going to be really good for them, because they can throw their stuff on a train, and if they're in New York City and they can sell it for cheaper than someplace in Fort Wayne, Indiana, even if they produce it there, fortunately, that company in Fort Wayne, Indiana, even though they're the local supplier, they're going to end up going under because they can't compete, right? Unfortunately, if something is the same quality and one is cheaper than the other, human beings are pretty good at picking the cheap option. I am definitely living proof of that. Okay. So as we're moving into that now, and we're talking about how railroads expanded the business, we need to start talking about how business itself was able to grow. Now, the railroads certainly helped, but in order to expand faster, they needed to come up with new ways to get more money that they could put into their business to expand it. And they get pretty creative with it. But in order to do that, you need a couple other things first. So let's take a quick look into what we're going into today. So we are going to have a reading guide due tomorrow already. I know that's a little bit faster than what we've been doing over the past little while, but it is really short, and I don't really think that it's going to be too difficult. The reading itself is even short, so hopefully it's not too bad. Remember, if you end up being a little bit late, or for whatever reason it takes you a little bit longer, it's okay. I'm not taking off late points, okay? So we're in the 1800s now. And I think the chapter of what you're going to be reading really does a good job in understanding what you need in order to grow a business. And the United States is going to have a whole bunch of all of these things. And it's going to propel it to be this tiny little brand new nation that just broke off from Great Britain, like so many other countries with their revolutions, and sets it on this course to become one of the most dominant nations in the world in like about 100 years, roughly. Not any of the others that declare their independence are able to do it at that fast of a rate. And it's because the United States has these three things. It's resources, people, and capital. Okay. Now, when we talk about resources, at the time, it's just going to mean raw materials that we can use in order to refine them to sell because people want them. And Minnesota should be absolutely no stranger to this. This is iron ore. And it's one of the things that the United States was super, super rich in that allowed it to expand really quickly. And Minnesota itself actually was the biggest producer of this iron ore in the Mesabi Range, which is in the Northwest. I've got a map here in a little while, and I can point it out if I remember. But that is a raw natural resource the United States was able to produce, and they were able to refine it into, well, at first it was the metal iron, and then eventually, as we're going to talk about next week, once more processes and more technologies come out, they're going to turn it into steel, which is an even higher quality metal, and it's way lighter, which makes it easier to transport. Next thing, timber. United States is full of trees. Even to this day, up in the Rocky Mountain range, the forests are unbelievably thick. Where we're at right now, Minnesota, my home state of Wisconsin, before people started settling there, like humans started settling there, they were solely trees. That was it. there was absolutely nothing else. People talk about all this farmland that was out here. Yeah, maybe, but it had to be cleared first. Now, when you've got an expanding country, it's a great thing to have access to all of this timber because you're going to turn that into lumber, which you're going to use to build homes. So this was a great source of jobs for people to be able to go out and do the jobs, make some money, and start a family. And the last thing that the United States has is land, okay? And that kind of goes along with what we're talking about here. Now, when we talk about building industry, building factories, mass producing goods, this looks like it could be like a wheat field or a cornfield or something, and that's fair. That probably doesn't have too much to do with it. But whether you're growing food crops that you can send back to allow people that work in the cities to purchase, or you're growing cash crops, let's say like in the United States, a big one was either tobacco or sugar in the South in some areas, or cotton. If you're growing those cash crops, you're able to send those to these new factories that are sprouting up so that they can make these new goods and then sell them to people, right? But you got to have land to do it. If you don't, it's pretty much impossible unless you want to import it from another country, and that costs a lot of money. So this is the Great Plains region right here, right? We've talked about this quite a few times with the Louisiana Purchase. This is where people are going to be expanding out to. Minnesota's right here, and that Mesabi Range is right over here, right by Lake Superior. Okay, so people are going to start expanding out west in order to take these new lands, but then also they're going to be sending a lot of these resources that they're getting back east, whether it's through that new thing called the railroad or through the Great Lakes, right? And the Mesabi Range is a great example. A lot of that iron ore that's produced from there gets thrown on a ship in Lake Superior, and it's going to end up going through the Great Lakes chain here down into Pennsylvania to a little town we call Pittsburgh, which is where they're going to end up producing a lot of the steel that's made from that iron. Pretty crazy that it has to travel that far. Now, the second thing that you need, wow, this was supposed to be nice and ready to go. Maybe it is. Huh, it is. Next thing you need is people, right? Now, the United States, we're going to start this video out here, and I'm going to play it at 1.5 speed. And pay particular attention to the year, as you'll see up here, and also the darkening of the color. The darker the color gets, the higher the density is. I'll play the music. It's good music. My fiance is not going to be happy with me for this, but that's okay. So we're starting out in 1790. That's right around the time the Constitution was ratified, right? And we see the darker areas over here in like present-day Massachusetts, even in areas, this is New York right here, and then Philadelphia is, Philadelphia be right in this area right here, okay? But watch as it starts to get darker and as the color starts to expand to the west. After 1830, that's when railroads start to become really popular to transport passengers, not just freight anymore. So you're going to see a real big explosion here between 1830 and 40. Then 1840 and 50, oh, something crazy is going to happen. And there we have our 49ers going out there trying to get some gold because they heard about that gold rush out there. Between 1840 and 50, the real crazy is not maybe a very good word, but the real important event that happens is the potato famine in Ireland, right? So we're going to have a whole lot of people that are now coming over here that are unskilled looking for work. Well, there's one of two things that could probably happen. One, they're going to go to these heavily populated areas over here and work in these new factories that are popping up, and especially a lot of women end up doing that in those textile factories that make clothing. Or you're going to see people try to make the voyage out west, as if I played this for another 20 years or so, and they're going to try and make their own homestead farms way out on the western frontier. Okay, but either way, they're either going to be producing a whole bunch of excess food that they can sell for money, or they're going to be working for factory wages in these bigger population centers. Okay, so you've got that. So you've got resources, and now the United States has people. The last thing that it needs is called capital. Now, capital is another word for something that allows you to expand business. In most cases, it means money. Now, the United States doesn't come up with this idea, as Rome didn't come up with the idea of representative government, but they kind of perfected it, right? The United States takes this idea of splitting businesses up into a whole bunch of parts that they can sell in order to get people to purchase it. And what do I mean by that? This is called shares of stock. So think about a company or a business as a whole pizza, okay? Now, each time that you cut into a piece of pizza or into a whole pizza, you take a slice out of it, right? Now, when it comes to talking about stock, what a company decides to do is they're going to split their company up into a whole bunch of small parts, and they're going to sell them to anybody who wants to buy them. And the hope is that if they put the price at a spot where people will purchase it, they can get that money in because they sold it to somebody. Now, why would somebody want to buy it? Well, because of what's called supply and demand, the more of these pieces of the company that are bought, the more the company is going to charge in order to sell it. And it's going to cause that price to go up. Now, as somebody who buys this stock or a piece of company, you can sell it for whatever price the company is willing to sell it for, no matter what you bought it for. So let's say that you bought a piece of a company at $7. That's how much you paid for it. But all of a sudden, you find out that now it's worth $13 and you want to sell that piece of company. Well, you're going to end up making an extra $6 because they're selling it for more than you bought it for. So for somebody who buys that stock, holy cow, this is a great way to make some really fast money. There's a problem. If the company does poorly or can't get people to buy its stock for whatever reason, and you sell it and it goes down, let's say you bought it at $7 and it goes down to $3, you're only getting $3 back. If you spend some money on a company and the company completely falls apart and goes bankrupt, some of you might have heard of the Great Depression, and you're going to talk about that in Mr. Wangard's class next year. That's because people spent way too much money on these stocks to make fast money, more money than they had. And these companies started going belly up. They didn't have the money to be able to compensate for it. And this happened on such a wide scale that basically everything fell apart in the matter of like a week. So when it comes to purchasing these stocks, people do it today. And there are other funds too. It's called like mutual funds where like they do it. It's kind of complicated, but it's a much lower risk platform than a stock. But why do people decide to do it? Well, I think that the answer is pretty clear, right? Now, they want to make a quick buck, but for the companies, what this does is this really allows them to get a whole bunch of money in really fast. And if they reinvest it, put it back into expanding their business, they can hopefully continue to grow this and make their stocks more desirable for people to purchase. Now, I do have a video that can explain it way better than me. It's on this tab. Highly recommended. I think it's only like 4 minutes long. It's really good. It explains how a stock exchange works and like how it began and how people plan to make money on it and what its use is in modern day world. So I highly recommend it. You've got your reading guide that's due tomorrow. That stock exchange video is right here. And holy Toledo, look at that. We just talked about that. So make sure you get your exit ticket done before you move on to other stuff. All right, that's all I got for you today. Happy reading guiding, and we will see you tomorrow for talking about people and inventions, and most notably, we are going to focus on Alexander Graham Bell. Maybe some of you know who that is. All right, have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.